All righty. Welcome everyone to our last webinar of 2021. Can you believe it? This year has flown by super fast. But I have to thank you all so much again, as always, for supporting me in this training opportunity and sharing your interest in volunteer engagement. I'm really happy every month that we get so many people who join us. And then for those of you who can't join us, who may be listening on our YouTube channel, we really appreciate all of your support. My name is Sydney Shuttro, and I'm the Director of Volunteer Engagement at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. So for those of you who have been with us from the start, you all know that we've shortened our series from last year. So we're not going to have any webinars in October, November, or December, because I know the fall is a super busy time for all of us. And while I'm sad that we're not going to talk, at least in this capacity, for the rest of the year, I just want to let everyone know I'm always here for you. So if anyone needs any help anytime, I'm only an email or a phone call away. So please don't hesitate to reach out. This month, we're going to talk about why volunteers leave and the ways we can work to reverse this and hopefully get them to stay. So just to preface everything, I'm not going to cover every single individual reason that volunteers leave. There are countless, probably hundreds of individual reasons, but we're going to kind of cast a broader net and look at the more common reasons why our volunteers may leave our programs. I do have to do my typical disclaimer that these webinars are being recorded, so please be sure to keep information confidential when we're talking about individual volunteers, clients, partners in the community, and things of that nature. Um, Also, everything that we talk about in these webinars is not required for you to implement in your program by any means. These are simply best practices through the research, personal experiences of myself and the members of the group who've joined us. So if you'd like to implement any of these suggestions or strategies in your program, please be sure to get the support of your supervisor, your management, or anybody like that before moving forward. Oh, I was going to say it's not working. Here we go. All right, so only good volunteers will stick around, right? If they leave, it's not our fault, it's all on them. I know that's the last thing that any of us who are listening right now thinks. So much of our time we spend recruiting volunteers, training them, getting them ready for placement, all for them to leave relatively shortly into their service or not volunteering at all. We spend 5 times more money and energy to develop new volunteers than we do focusing on the current ones that we have. Many people think dozens or even hundreds of volunteers is the key to making a volunteer program successful. Depending on your program, maybe that's true. Highly doubtful that that's going to be kind of a common, an overall consensus from everyone. Maybe for a large event, you want, dozens or maybe 100 volunteers. But my guess is more often than not, we want less volunteers who are going to be committed and able to do their duties and responsibilities well than having dozens or hundreds of volunteers that we have to manage and maintain. It's crazy and chaotic. We're not going to be able to do that as easily as if we had those core groups. This cycle can result in major struggles trying to find places to recruit volunteers as well. So as we recruit from our general pools, as people keep leaving, word's going to get back to the people that we generally recruit from, like, hey, we just sent you 10 people and 7 of them aren't working with you anymore. I don't think we're going to send anymore. So we're going to focus more on the reasons why it's important to understand why volunteers leave our service and see if we can find strategies to avoid the common reasons and discuss a few we may have not considered. There was a couple in the research that I found really interesting. So to get us started, there's some reasons volunteers leave that sometimes we or even the volunteers themselves, we can't control it. So one thing is a death or illness in the family. So we always keep the door open for volunteers in this situation that they can come back whenever they're ready, depending on the situation. They may also decide not to come back depending on how things go in their personal life, and we just have to try and work harder to respect that decision. Not that we don't respect the decision, but it's kind of like, man, you're a really great volunteer. I understand things are going on, but we don't want you to leave, but we do have to respect that decision if a volunteer decides to. We've also had the situation where a volunteer themselves has passed unexpectedly. And it's extremely sad situation. And I've seen a lot of our programs do some really amazing things to support the families of our volunteers, from sending cards and flowers to attending the volunteers' memorial or funeral service, and even inviting the family to maybe a recognition event to honor their loved one. We just kind of talked about this before the webinar series began, but we do have some volunteers who unfortunately move away. So a bulk of our volunteers are older adults or working professionals. I would say we have some true volunteers, but I think that's a bulk of our volunteer workforce. Just a reminder, if everybody could mute themselves. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. I'm going to start muting people if I hear background noise, not trying to be rude. So many times our retired volunteers are going to want to move and live closer to their family and spend some more, uh, or even spend part of the time of the year somewhere else. You know, we have our, I think they call them snowbirds. Is that right? Where people who live in, the super cold areas go to Florida for, the winter and things of that nature. Most of our programs are not done remotely. So once someone leaves, it's probably the final straw that they're going to end, the volunteer's going to end their service. Our professional volunteers may find other opportunities in other states or even another job in another agency that doesn't have to, or that isn't working as closely with us, and they may end their volunteer service from that perspective. We can only hope that if a volunteer moves to somewhere else, maybe it's another state, they continue their volunteer service with a similar program to ours in the area that they're living in. I think that would be a good, we can't have them, but at least they're doing the services that we have somewhere else. And the last one that can kind of be out of our control somewhat is some of our volunteers want to retire from volunteering. They've already retired from their job, they've done their community service, and now they want to just kind of do everything themselves. We'll always have veteran volunteers that we just don't want to lose. We don't want them to go away. In reality, there's going to be a time when our volunteers, no matter what age, want to retire from their service. We can try to convince them to stay in maybe a smaller capacity. Maybe we give them a whole bunch of stuff to do and we just kind of take some things off their plate, hoping that they'll prolong their service. But we also need to respect their decision and appreciate, especially the time that we had with them and the work that they did for us and the value of their input to improve the program is going to be really key as they transition out of service, making sure we know exactly everything that they did for their service and try and be able to fill that role with another volunteer. So those are some things that are kind of more out of our control. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples of those things as well, but those are just a few. The research that I looked at, and every time we do these, all of my sources for everything that I talk about is at the bottom of the screen there. And when I do on my follow-up email this afternoon, I'll be sure to include this presentation as a PDF so you can just click on those resources. Some of our volunteers may feel like they're on the outs, and I use quotes on the outs. There are 3 reasons why volunteers leave that kind of have the word out in them, so I combined them all together to try and be clever. Hopefully it worked. Burnout is the first out. This happens when we ask volunteers to do too much. We're fairly regularly overwhelmed with our day-to-day tasks as it is, right? Or maybe it's just me. I don't think I'm alone in that, but if it's just me, then I need to work on it. I think some of you can relate to this feeling, of course. It's not intentional, but sometimes we pass our feelings of being overwhelmed onto our volunteers by asking those that we know who are wonderful and that we rely on in those tough times to do even more. Maybe that's additional calls to clients, adding a new meal route, or signing up additional rides for their routes, teaching an additional class, something of those lines. We may be able to get away with this on occasion, maybe a rare occasion, but when we're consistent in asking the same volunteers to do more, we risk volunteers leaving because they just have too much. And then we're in an even worse situation than when we started. Oop, skipped ahead too far. One way I found in the research that I thought was really unique to prevent the burnout and keep these volunteers who may be experiencing burnout in our programs longer is creating a leave of absence policy for our volunteers. I can already feel a little bit of hesitancy, like, well, these are volunteers. They already make their own schedules for the most part. Do we really need to have a leave of absence policy for them? Well, that's true. And to an extent, it's helpful for us as staff to know, or well, it's true to an extent. It's extremely helpful for us as staff to know in advance when a volunteer is not going to be available. It can help to reduce the occurrence of burnout if the volunteers know, okay, I have a lot on my plate and I agreed to do all these commitments and I'm going to honor those commitments, but I'm going to request some time off and to rest once these commitments are done and just say, I can't do any more right now. Check back with me in a month or so. Some of us have this in place already. It's just not a formal policy. But if you see volunteers who are overwhelmed regularly, they may not be thinking that they can take time to themselves or that it's not an option. I've heard from more than one volunteer, and I know some people who work with this volunteer will probably know who I'm referring to, but I'm not going to say any names because we're being recorded. I've heard from more than one volunteer that they think that if they take time off, the people that they serve are not going to be helped by anyone else. They are the only people who can help the people in their community. So we just have to do a better job if volunteers feel that way. We have to try and do a better job to reassure that we have a plan in place to make sure when someone needs a little bit of time for themselves, the people that they serve are still going to continue to be taken care of. We know we're going to take care of them, just kind of reassuring the volunteers that they will be taken care of. Now moving on to the next one. Instead of burnout, we have the cool out. This is the exact opposite of burnout. Rather than giving the volunteers too much, we aren't giving the volunteers enough or anything to do at all. For many volunteers, this is the top reason, or at least one of that's close to the top reasons that they leave. You want me to volunteer, but then I have nothing to do or very little to do. I think we see this most often, at least in my experience, when we have large events that we think we need these big, large groups of volunteers to help with, when really we only need probably about half of that amount to show up, where the other half of the volunteers are kind of standing around doing nothing because the major assignments have already been assigned to those volunteers. So planning is going to be your best friend when it comes to making sure volunteers you recruit have something to do. For some programs, it's easier than others. And I say easy with air quotes as well, because very little about our jobs is anything that we would classify as easy. So don't send me the hate emails and stuff that I think our jobs are easy. They are definitely not. Some programs may have, I guess, a better word is a less stressful time at making sure cool out is not one of the reasons that their volunteers leave. I'm thinking, for example, like Meals on Wheels and My Ride. And again, don't yell at me. The only reason I say that is because planning is already a huge major part of those programs already. So you know the meal routes you have and how many riders that are needing transportation that week, month, whatever it might be. So when you train volunteers, it's less likely a volunteer is going to have nothing to do, right? You already know in advance we have 10 riders. We're probably going to need at least 5 volunteers to see if they'll do 2 rides a week, or if they're only need to do 1 ride a week or 1 ride a month, we might need to increase that number. But you can plan it out a little bit better. SHIP is another great example of this, and I'll use them for an example of cool out. Excuse me. Next month's Medicare's open enrollment period. During this time, different regions do a lot of in-person events where people can come and staff and volunteers will do plan comparisons. And I say that they did this pre-COVID. Maybe we're going into a phase where you can do that again, maybe not, but either way, this is at least has been done in the past and it's been extremely effective. So volunteers are heavily dependent on to make sure these events run smoothly. The best part is everyone is assigned a task. So it's very kind of triaged, I guess would be a good word to use. You have a greeter, you have the person who receives the comparison worksheet, you have a person who runs the comparison, then the person who explains the results of the comparison and helps enroll that person, then another person to give a thank you and ask if there's anything else that the person who attends the event needs and maybe ask them to do an evaluation of the event. These are extremely hectic events. You're getting people in and out. Uh, you try and do schedules as best you can so you can plan how many people are coming in, but sometimes you'll have walk-ins. Um, but they do not ask 30 volunteers to attend an event um, and have a result of 15 volunteers doing nothing. They have shifts. Maybe, you have volunteers coming in the morning, then you have a little bit of overlap and you have the other volunteers coming in the afternoon. So the morning volunteers can help train the afternoon volunteers and kind of show them the flow. And just everyone knows at the end of the day, at the end of this event, what they came to do was extremely important. They had a great impact, and everything was just a job extremely well done, and they move on to the next event. The third out um, is our volunteers who've been working with the program together for a while tend to kind of gravitate toward one another. It's likely that they all went to it's kind of like when they all went to the same school together, a school, quote unquote, but they went through the same training class. So as you go through training together, you kind of you form a little bond just because you're there together. New volunteers coming into the program can sometimes see this as a club or a clique that was already formed, and no one wants me to join. I wasn't in their group, so they kind of feel left out sometimes. A great way to counter this is possibly a reason for leaving is starting a mentor program with veteran and new volunteers. And I believe some of us have already started these programs. A lot, it's a great way to empower current volunteers to become more of a leader in the program. Maybe a program sometimes uh, maybe like doing some kind of a policy or a requirement that the volunteer has to volunteer with the program for a year and be in good standing, and then the volunteer can be considered for being a mentor in the mentor program. So that way they have those goals and something to strive for. Okay, I got a little bit longer and then I'm going to be a mentor. My mentor was great for me. I want to make sure that I'm a mentor for the next group that comes in. This program really helps veteran volunteers help new volunteers understand their duties and responsibilities by actually watching it happen. So we've talked in the past about the different learning styles, your auditory, visual, kinesthetic, the people who learn hands-on. This is really a great help in your training to get that hands-on experience if we have kind of I don't want to say a buddy system, but you can also have it be a buddy system, but more the mentor program. This could be going with someone on a meal route or doing a ride, listening to a counseling session, or attending an outreach event. Hopefully, bonds will grow and the seasoned and new volunteers will come together as a team to achieve our missions, and will be more of a community focus than oh, there's the older volunteers and here are the newer ones. Everybody comes together. Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, you just can't win? On the flip side, has it ever been a time where everything is great, I can't lose, I'm hitting my goals, everything's going fantastic? Volunteers can feel the same way and actually could be reasons why they leave, which you can understand the I can't lose, you want to leave, but also or you can't win that you might want to leave. The can't lose is an interesting one that I didn't think about. But let's start with you just can't win. When a volunteer feels like there's no hope, everything they are doing is doomed, or the goals are so unclear that they don't even know why they're working so hard on a project, it'll be nearly impossible to keep them around. For example, there are 1.2 million Medicare beneficiaries in Tennessee, and they all need plan comparisons in an 8-week time frame during open enrollment. 1 in 4 adults fall every year, and we need to make sure that no one falls again. By 2030, the population of people 65 and older will increase by 46%, and we need to make sure everyone has services when they need them. If that's how we approach it, which thankfully I know none of us do that, but for the sake of the example, if anyone is currently doing that, well, heck yeah, if I'm a volunteer, I'm going to see those as what I'm supposed to do in a short amount of time, yeah, I'm probably going to peace out. Like those are extreme goals that I'm not seeing that we can achieve in a short amount of time. So to help counter this feeling of defeat, it's good to set smaller goals and objectives so that a major goal you thought was unreachable is actually put into a more manageable picture. So SHIP, for an example, open enrollments are busiest time of year, and we'll need all hands on deck. So letting them know that they're really important. We have multiple methods to help people during this time, from electronic communication via email or fax, snail mail, and phone calls. Let us know which method of communication you prefer. Getting them involved. I don't necessarily want to make those phone calls, but I'm happy to email some people. And we can get you started on helping people save money for next year. If every volunteer we have is willing to help at least 30 people in an 8-week period, that's a heck of a lot more manageable than 1.2 million, right? Over the 8-week period, that's only 4 people a week. If volunteers can do that for us, we can serve over 12,000 people in that short amount of time. That's a more manageable goal. It sounds like a crazy high number, but when you break it down like that, you can get volunteers on board and you can get them to do the stuff. Another example is with the SAIL program. We cannot guarantee an adult 65 or older will never experience a fall again. It's just part of, well, it's not a natural part of aging. I don't want to say it that way, but I mean, I fell the other day. It happens at any age. So we cannot guarantee another fall is not going to happen. But what we can do is promote prevention, do outreach, and provide programs and services to help educate people and their families on ways to reduce the incidences of falls. The 25 people in your class have a higher chance of not experiencing a fall because of the amazing work that you do. So, not looking at all 25% of the older adult population falling, but just focusing on that small class that you are dedicated to and how you're impacting their lives. That can help someone who feel like they just can't win get back on track and just focus on what they can do. So the opposite of this, and I hope everyone understands the Back to the Future reference, my way of kind of livening up things. Even though I can't hear your laughter, I'm hoping people are laughing. So this is the opposite of can't win, where a volunteer just can't lose. And it sounds like a good problem to have, right? Like, heck yeah, everyone's happy. We're achieving all of our goals. But when there's no excitement because things seem so easy, that's where the problem lies. So it's important to avoid this reason for leaving by making goals a little bit tougher, but not impossible. So talk with the volunteers and get their input on goals. Evaluations are one of the key components to the volunteer engagement process some of us want to or tend to ignore. I am one of those people. Evaluations are not my favorite part of the process. Granted, it's always, generally speaking, good evaluations, but it's just, I don't know why I need to do better at it. Every webinar, there's something I need to do better at. And for this one, it's evaluations. Uh, these don't have to be formal evaluations. They can be informal, just a meeting, just a quick phone call, an email. It doesn't have to be, okay, every year on this date, you're coming in for an hour and we're going to talk. But on a regular or semi-regular basis would be helpful in making sure activities that we're giving to volunteers meet their skill level and interest. So how was your first month of your service as you're talking to a new volunteer? I see you exceeded your goal, which is amazing. Really great work. Um, Here's how you're meeting or you meeting your goals is impacting the program. So always relating it back to our mission, relating it back to that impact. As we look into your goals for your next activity, um, the goals that we set for you initially seemed a little too low. Maybe it was a little easy for you to achieve. Um, how do you think about, or what do you think about increasing your goals a little bit? Do you think this is manageable? What number do you see, or whatever the activity might be? I'm just using numbers as an example. But having them in the discussion to determine what goal is achievable for them, how they see their achieving that goal impacts the program, and also helping give them a little bit more of a challenge, especially using the skills that they either already have or have learned from training, is going to help keep them around and not seem as simple of a task that we're having them do. No growth, This is a big one as well that we see quite a few volunteers leaving because of. Come on, there we go. So the work we ask volunteers to do should be interesting and offer a variety of ways for volunteers to achieve some form of growth, whether that be personal or sometimes professional. So kind of in the picture on the screen, I have my comfort zone. I have, I'm used to doing this. This is what I've always done. I like doing it. But at the same time, sometimes being in that comfort zone can get a little bit boring. So we want to try and give opportunities for growth to see if the volunteer is willing to expand. The tough part of this reason for leaving is we won't know that the reason that they're leaving is because they didn't have an opportunity to grow until probably as the volunteer is leaving, or it's too late for us to suggest things, trainings and such for them to grow. So letting the volunteers know about additional trainings on the forefront, maybe in your orientation, that, hey, you're going to go through training and we're always going to have some opportunities for you to learn more and build upon your skills. These don't have to be trainings that you develop or implement yourself. Don't put necessarily more work on yourself. Maybe there's other resources from national, regional, state, and local partners that volunteers would really be interested in. Asking volunteers to become to become part of or develop a committee would be a really great opportunity for them to grow and experience more leadership skills. Last month, we talked about volunteer leaders. This personal growth is a great way to get a volunteer who would do, your regular volunteer roles, delivering a meal and whatnot, to getting up to more of a leadership level and being that mentor for that mentor program. I'm seeing now in the chat box that there's a mentorship program in the South Central region that's worked great. So having that leadership skill and personal growth. How great would it be for volunteers to serve on a recruitment and retention committee, or having the volunteers head up how we're going to recognize volunteers this year, really allowing them to get into the process. Oop, I think I had more pictures and I didn't show them. Yes, wanting to learn more for the trainings, and then making sure that we use their skills, abilities, and knowledge that they already have. So we're going to use what they already know and hopefully expand upon that through our additional trainings. Sorry, I got so excited about everything I wanted to talk about. I forgot to move the slides forward. Another top reason why volunteers leave is that they don't feel appreciated for the work they do. What they're doing is simply just not enough for us to acknowledge what they've done. And I know this is something that we all strive to make sure that we appreciate our volunteers. So I'm hoping that this isn't one of the reasons that our volunteers leave, but across the board, this is one of the top reasons. Volunteers need appreciation, and frankly, they deserve it. And I think we all can agree on that. We're not talking about giving volunteers the moon and the stars in terms of recognition, but at a very minimum, common courtesy, making sure that they get a thank you, whether that be in person as the event's going on, after the event, a thank you note, email, something along those lines, a simple thank you. One appreciation word that we often forget about, that we tend to focus more on the thank you, but something we need to focus a little more on is the please. Even though duties and responsibilities are clearly defined, we have those in our role descriptions, and we have told the volunteers what to expect, asking them with a please can be a way that you show that they're valued. Hey everyone, it's the beginning of the month. You know what that means. It's time to submit your data reports or your volunteer reports, however, whatever you call them. If you could please send me your reports no later than the 10th, that would give me plenty of time to compile everything for our monthly report that's due on the 20th. Thank you so much. Isn't it the minding our P's and Q's, the please and thank you. Ooh, sorry, we're getting a little feedback here. I'm going to figure out who that is real quick. There we go. And sometimes appreciation doesn't mean a please or a thank you. It just means paying attention and having good communication skills. So returning phone calls and emails timely, passing along information that you promised or that you think is important for the volunteers to be successful. Scheduling meetings at times the volunteers are available. Granted, you have to be available too, but trying to cater more to their schedule as best you can than your schedule. Giving them a lot of options rather than just, hey, I'm free at 1 o'clock today. Are you? Not exactly going with their time frame. More often than not, what a volunteer will remember is as to how we appreciate them and recognize them is not going to be an award necessarily or a spotlight in a newsletter, but it's going to be how attentive we were to their needs and how we made them feel about the work that they did and continue to do. So it's not necessarily those material objects, but it's a feeling that will help the volunteers feel that appreciation that hopefully they're not lacking, but in some cases may feel like they're lacking. All right, external versus internal. We do have some external opposition sometimes that results in the reasons why a volunteer may leave. And this can be something like when a family or friends don't like how much their loved one is volunteering and they decide to leave to make their families and friends feel better and spend more time with them. I have personal experience with this in the past, and it is not fun. Being made feel guilty about volunteering is not fun at all. It seems like something we can't control because the last thing that we want to do is get in the middle of volunteers and their home and personal issues. We definitely don't want to do that. We don't want to cause that drama. But we do have to look at it from a perspective, though. If a volunteer is missing important events with their family because they're volunteering with us, I can sort of see where that tension might lie. A little bit more on the volunteer to make sure that they tell us no if there's an important event going on. But I can see where this could happen. How can we prevent this reason for leaving without getting involved? Because we definitely shouldn't. One thing to consider is getting the family involved or the friend who may be causing that or external opposition involved in some way. Not necessarily having the family members volunteer, because if they don't like their loved one volunteering, they might not want to volunteer, or it might not be a good fit for them. But inviting them to see what the program and the organization does and how their loved one is making an impact. So this can be done through maybe an open house where everyone just kind of comes in one night and or a virtual open house, depending on how things are going, or even a volunteer recognition event that you're able to have. So some of the volunteers, family and friends, may not like their loved one volunteering because, or another reason is because they don't believe in our program's mission and vision. We of course are extremely and fully invested in our mission and vision. We don't see a problem with it. Other people, potentially could for one reason or another. So another way of getting the family and friends more involved is by educating them during these recognition events or open houses or whatever we're able to do, is educating those individuals on our services and programs, um, to show them exactly what we're about instead of maybe what their preconceived notions are. It could be a really powerful tool to help that volunteer's family member say, okay, I don't want you to leave this volunteer service because it is a good organization, but maybe you can scale back your hours so we don't lose them completely, but we're able to find that good, healthy balance. That one's a tough one. Internal conflict. So we have the external side. Now we're going to talk about the internal side. We've discussed this before. Not all volunteers are going to have the winning personalities that everyone's going to get along with, right? So everyone who volunteers with our programs wants to help because they value our mission and our vision. That we can all agree on. They're not going to come to us if they don't agree with what we're doing. But what we can't assume or even expect is because we all agree with our cause that we're all going to get along, or we think that everything should be done the exact same way. Part of the solution to that is just kind of accepting it. Like, okay, we know we're going to have different personalities, but this could be in addition to your training, kind of setting the tone that, we're all here for a reason. We all have different ways and views of doing things, but we're going to come together. And if there are conflicts that come up, we're between volunteers and staff or volunteers and clients, community partners or other volunteers themselves, that this is how we're going to handle it. We know different person do those like fun personality tests. We've done that in our staff meetings before where it was kind of the doers, the thinkers, and there was two other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head. But as the analysis went on, the thinkers and the doers aren't necessarily going to work that well together solo. Because the doers, we're just going to want to do something while the thinkers are going to try and work out every process, and we're going to tell them, hurry up. We want to get all this stuff done. So that was kind of an interesting way in a staff meeting that I learned, okay, that's why maybe I'm not getting along with a particular coworker very well, is because they're a thinker. And now I understand what they're doing in their process, and I can't be mad at them for it. I don't think things through completely, so it might be good to adjust my views to let the thinkers help me a little bit more. That might be very psychological and a little bit more in depth than we want to go in, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. There's no straightforward answer to this either. So I can give you uh, ways to resolve I can't give you those ways to resolve any conflict, unfortunately. Your organization is going to have those policies in place and how to resolve major and personality issues, hopefully, or you might have to get some of maybe your supervisor or somebody in to kind of help you out with that. One particular article had some interesting resolution methods that I thought were pretty funny to share that I think we'll all agree, which is a better one to look at. So there's 4 different methods that they suggest. Staff mediating the battle. Okay. And they make it sound very combative, which I don't mean that in a serious way. It's kind of a funny way. But letting the volunteers duke it out, probably not the best. Urging volunteers to make up. And then the one that I think we can probably all lean more toward is maybe if there's such a bad conflict, reorganizing the work so that those 2 volunteers don't have to work so much together. So I'm not recommending that any of those 4 ways is how you do it. Definitely talk with your supervisors and things uh, to make sure you know how to resolve any of that kind of internal conflict with personalities. Another reason um, is policy disagreement. So in most cases of our programs, at least, I think everyone gets along fairly well with one another. We haven't had too many major issues or big blowouts, or at least that I've been aware of. But sometimes the conflict is not over personalities, but policies of our program. So some of you may have experienced this as your programs created new policies and procedures around COVID. I had a volunteer who reached out to me about volunteering for Meals on Wheels in my ride and asked if there would be a mask policy in place. Now, keep in mind, this was back in April 2020. And I said, yeah, it's my understanding that if you want to volunteer with either of these programs in this particular area that you live in, masks are going to be required for volunteers to wear while you're doing your service. Boy, oh boy, did I get an earful. Well, I guess I should say eyeful because it was an email, but neither here nor there. He was not happy about that. He was adamant that he would never wear a mask. And I listened to him and I said, okay, I understand your concern. However, I have to let you know, unfortunately, you're not going to be a good fit for our volunteer programs at this time. But we will be happy to keep you on our list. And if that mask mandate or policy, I shouldn't say mandate, mask policy is ever lifted, we'll reach back out to you to see if you're interested in volunteering for our program. And many of us have seen volunteers leave or suspend their service because of other issues that are the opposite, like not requiring everyone to be vaccinated. Was one reason that one of my volunteers stopped their service, is because they wanted everyone that they worked with to be vaccinated. And we just simply, we're not allowed to mandate that. So she's suspended her service. I'm still letting her know about all the updates to the program. And when she's comfortable that she can come back. While policies and procedures are in place for many, many reasons, and more times than not, the policy probably is not going to be able to change, or at least not be able to be changed easily or quickly. It'll be hard to keep those volunteers from leaving if they feel strongly enough about the situation. However, there are a couple things that we can do. We can reduce our backlash or the conflict with that volunteer by making sure that we listen to their concerns. Volunteers who quit over policy disagreements say that they quit because they don't feel like they were understood. So listening to them, trying to summarize their concerns back to them to show that you understand and that you're not saying, the reasons why you don't want to volunteer are stupid. We don't agree with that. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to just summarize it and say, what I'm hearing is You're not comfortable with wearing a mask, so you're not happy with the policies that we've created. I understand where you're coming from in that. This shows that you understand their point of view and, in a way, respect that point of view. Even if you have a different point of view, we can still respect people's different points of view. You may have the option to let them know that you'll talk to your legal department or your supervisor as well about the concerns, but you can't promise any changes are going to be made. So this will hopefully help the volunteer accept the decision that accept that you've done everything that you could do uh, to try and resolve any issues that they have. And if the decision is ultimately that the volunteer needs to leave their service, they're going to leave on good terms and they're going to accept the decision. Confusion is common in all aspects of life. I don't know if you've ever been confused, but I'm confused quite often. So it's understandable that a volunteer will have questions, need some clarity on the roles that we want them to do. Too much confusion, however, or a lack of understanding will end with volunteers leaving the program. In marketing, there's a common phrase or a rule, I guess I should say, that's a person needs to hear something 7 times before to remember it. 7 times to remember it. While we're not in marketing, granted we market some for our programs, we're not, market based. I think the same rule really kind of applies to our volunteers. So, I cannot get through a monthly session of this series without mentioning the volunteer role description. So this is our first impression on new volunteers to give them the details on their duties and responsibilities, their time commitment, who they're reporting to, and just so much more. So this is an ever evolving document. So as confusion comes up, that's a sign that you may need to go back and update your volunteer role description so that confusion doesn't continue on to the new incoming volunteers. So the rule of 7, as much as it may frustrate us, we can repeat ourselves 7 times, right? Um, One thing I wanted to try, and I know this isn't super interactive because no one has their cameras on, I kind of disabled those, but I want to play a game. I'm a game person. So I do this a lot in our volunteer trainings to encourage them to ask questions and see how easily it is for the instructions that I give to maybe sometimes be misinterpreted. And it really helps me get to know them and kind of like, if I don't communicate well, I want you to tell me that I don't communicate well. I think we might have done this last year as well, but that's okay. Why not? Let's do it again. So this is a really good way to engage people in training, in-person training, if you're starting to lose the crowd. So if some of you have kind of dozed off in my presentation, hopefully I can bring you back. But one thing, what I need you all to do is get a scrap piece of paper. If y'all could grab one of those for me. And make sure this paper is about to be destroyed. So make sure it doesn't have any, important things on it, anything from a meeting that you're in, any notes that you're taking from today. But grab that scrap piece of paper for me. All right, while you're grabbing that piece of paper, I'm going to tell you the rules. Very simple rules. There's only 2 of them. 1, you must follow my instructions. And 2, you cannot ask any questions, which is good because most of all of you are muted. So if you ask me a question, I wouldn't be able to hear it anyway. Or if you want to type a question in the chat box, no offense, I'm not going to answer it. So those are our rules. Hopefully everybody understands. So here's what we're going to do. Remember, you have to follow my instructions. So grab your piece of paper, put it in your hands. I want you to fold your paper in half. Okay, your paper's folded in half. I want you to tear off a corner. Okay, this is a lot easier when you're in person because I can actually see if people are listening to what I'm doing. Anywho, fold your paper in half again. Hopefully anyone who's listening on YouTube is also doing this exercise. Tear off the bottom corner of your paper. Okay, now tear off the top corner of your paper. Fold your paper one more time and tear off that last corner. Okay, now that we've all followed the instructions, let's everybody open up their paper. And now if we were all in a room together and we were all in person, what I would do is be doing this along with you. So it wouldn't just be me telling you guys what to do, but I would also be participating. And I would expect that my amazing instructions that I just gave you all, everyone's going to have the same design that I have because I'm doing it with you. So everyone should have the exact same design. But would that happen? Honestly, of course not. My instructions were too vague. And I bet some of you were even thinking or even saying out loud because I can't hear you, um, which corner is she talking about? How am I supposed to fold my paper? She is a terrible teacher. Well, that last one hurt my feelings a little bit. I understand. As you all have realized now, my instructions were intentionally awful. If volunteers are confused with the training we give them or don't understand what we're asking them to do, we need to be patient as they ask us those same questions, probably roughly 7 times. And we need to try not to, or we need to be almost annoyingly specific on what we expect from them. So if we did this exercise again, and I asked you to grab another piece of paper, which I'm not going to do, but if I gave more instructions like fold your paper in half hot dog style, so I'm from Indiana. I don't know if this was a thing in Tennessee when we were in kindergarten, when our teacher asked us to fold papers. Hot dog style meant you folded it in half long ways. Hamburger style, you folded it in half widthwise. So I'm getting the thumbs up from Cindy. So at least someone's heard of that. And then if I would say, make sure that the fold is at the top and cut off or and tear off the top right corner. Those would be more instructions that hopefully would get us to have a similar snowflake type design for that project. Some aspects of our program we can be a little bit more flexible with in terms of volunteers. So we don't have to necessarily be as annoyingly specific. Like how they report their data is one thing that I've been a little bit more flexible with my volunteers. It doesn't really matter how they get it to me. The important thing is I'm getting the data, right? That's one of the things we struggle with. I know many of us do in our programs in general is just getting that data from our volunteers every month or every quarter, depending on your policies. We all know it can be like pulling teeth to get that information, but I get emails, faxes, snail mail, text messages, and I even get I have a monthly call set up with a volunteer so she can verbally report to me everything that she did the previous month because she's having some computer issues. So while we want to be specific with our expectations, we can be a little bit flexible in some of our areas as well, so more volunteers can get that important information to us. The last reason volunteers leave we're going to discuss is the lack of organizational support. So this all starts with us. We do everything we can to support our volunteers, but sometimes we may fall short. That could be because we have too many volunteers and we just can't manage them all of their individual needs as well. Or many of us in volunteer engagement that we found out at the beginning of last year is less than half of our job responsibility is dedicated to volunteer engagement. So that just doesn't leave us very much time to be able to focus on the supports that our volunteers need. Sometimes it is something like not showing the volunteers impact that they're having on the program and the people that we serve could show that they or could give the volunteers a sense that the organization doesn't support them when we really do. We do our best. So um, regular and consistent feedback is a great way to show your volunteers that they are supported. This can be done individually through performance reviews or evaluations that can be formal or informal, like we talked about a little while ago. Going back over the volunteer role description with the volunteers and highlighting what they're doing well and maybe some things that they can improve upon, and asking them in that meeting, how can I support you or what resources can I supply you to help you improve in this specific area? What don't you have to meet this goal that you need that I can provide? Communication is going to be key as well. So as including these feedback sessions. Uh, One thing that I found that's really helpful, and I think a couple programs do this as well, is I do a quarterly virtual meeting with one of my volunteer groups for one of my programs. We go over the goals of the program that we have and our progress in reaching those goals so they can see that impact. If we have good news stories or testimonials from our volunteers or participants, I love to add those to get the volunteers to share anything good that's going on in their area. We also ask for suggestions to improve and create any resources that could be helpful. Recently, it was suggested to create a volunteer directory that shows the county that everyone lives in. And we kind of did that through a color-coded map. So that way volunteers in similar geographic areas can work together. And if someone needs a sub for a class or help in any way, maybe shadowing, kind of doing that mentor program we talked about a little while ago as well, they know who's in their general area and they can reach out to them. We also leave time to discuss any kind of struggles or obstacles that anyone is facing, and we discuss it as a group. Our veteran volunteers love to share their stories, and many of them have experienced the same struggles new volunteers are facing, and they're happy to tell them how they've overcome that obstacle or that roadblock. It really has helped us become more of a community, even though we're spread across the state, and our numbers continue to increase. And I'm really not having that much of a hard time in getting data from everybody. Knock on wood. Hopefully, I didn't just jinx myself, but we've gotten a really great group together that hopefully, at least in my opinion, I hope they feel supported. But if not, they have that open communication to tell me how they need, if they need more support, how I can do that. And those are the reasons I have. So here's a few takeaways for you. Remember that not everything is within your control, and that's okay. This is something I struggle with because I'm a control freak. Unexpected things happen all the time, and all we can do is support the volunteer as much as we can and let them know how much we appreciate all that they did while they served in their role. Planning is going to help volunteers who feel on the outs feel like they're back in. So planning can reduce burnout if we can allow volunteers to take some time away if they need to from being overwhelmed, or we can give them too much so they don't fall in that cool out. Making sure we have valuable activities to do so they don't feel like they're not doing anything or what they're doing isn't important. And plan the number of volunteers you need as best you can, but try not to overestimate to avoid some people having little to no contribution. Try that mentorship program to help integrate veteran volunteers and new volunteers so those cliques don't start to form, and all volunteers, no matter how long they've served, feel like a team, feel like a community. Provide those opportunities, for growth, skill building, and leadership. Not only will the volunteers not leave, but they're going to be able to help create more opportunities for the program to grow as well and really, really help us individually making our programs more successful. Appreciate everything the volunteers do to help the program and serve our clients, from stuffing envelopes to creating playlists of individual music for people and everything in between. No role is too small or not valued. And the last kind of key takeaway is clear up any confusion, even if it's the same question 7 times. Maybe it's not the volunteer's fault that there's confusion, but we need to find a way to explain things a little bit differently or deliver our message a little different. Be as detailed as you can, but also be patient when needed. So as we that's the bulk of the information. So please feel free to type in any questions, comments, any additions that you'd like to share. Before I get to the volunteer impact report update, there is something that I want everyone to share. If you would be willing to type in the chat box if you have the access, is let me know something that you learned that stuck with you from the series over this past year. What was the third reason of out? So there was burnout, keep out, and cool out. So burnout was too much, cool out was too little, and keep out was those cliques or those groups of people that form. Good question. But do me a favor, in the chat box, tell me something that you've learned that stuck with you throughout the whole series, January to September of this year, or heck, you can even go into our series in 2020. It doesn't have to be from today's webinar, but I understand it's fresh in your brain. So if you wanted to say something that stuck out to you in today's discussion, I understand that too. And I'll read those to the group kind of at the end. So please feel free to start sharing, and I'll share my big takeaways too. So getting into the volunteer impact report a little bit. I teased this a couple months ago, and then we had some leadership changes. So now I'm back to say that the volunteer impact report is nearly completed. Woohoo! I am so excited. Look how pretty it is. Really have to give big props to our graphic designer, Trevor, who created the design and the formats. I just gave him all the information. So as you can see, since we're so far into 2020, the report is going to be titled the 2021 Volunteer Impact Reports, but we will have notations on all of the data sets that all the data is from January 1 to December 31st, 2020. And I have to give a huge thank you to all of these programs listed on your screen because they are the programs that have contributed to this report. So our goal is to have the next edition for the Volunteer Impact Report for 2021 out by the start of Volunteer Appreciation Week next year, which I believe is April 18th to the 22nd. I might be a week early on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the date. So make sure that you're tracking your data because in January, I'm going to be calling and asking for some of your data and starting that collection process. So again, thank you everyone who's continued to report monthly data to me. That has been extremely helpful. And I love sharing all of the data and the stories that you guys send me every month with our upper management. Our new director is very excited about everything that we're doing in terms of volunteers. He's very excited about this report, and I'm really happy that we've been able to get his buy-in throughout this process. So I'm going to give you a little preview. I hope I'm able to do this. If not, whoops, that's okay. So here's what you saw the cover, awesome cover. Here's what the inside's going to look like. So each program that I listed on the previous screen is going to have 2 full-length pages dedicated to it. The layout will be kind of when you open the report, you're going to have the impact or the overview of the program, and then you're going to have this infographic on the other side. So check out the awesome impact of our senior centers. All this data for all the different programs is going to be statewide. So we didn't break it down by individual regions or individual programs. And also keep in mind with all these great numbers that you're seeing on the screen from our senior centers that this was the year of COVID where most of our senior centers, if not all of them, were shut down for at least 6 months or longer. So truly amazing work. The final report will be released electronically as well, so everyone can have access to these infographics as needed. I mean, look at this. You got 27,681 older adults attended some kind of recreational activity at the senior centers across the state. And this is through all about 120 plus senior centers. So it's just amazing, amazing things. They had over 2,100 volunteers for these senior centers, and their hours were almost 52,000. Fantastic. Super excited. I'm loving all of the takeaways that are coming in. I'm going to get to those in a little bit. Thank you for those of you who've contributed. Much appreciated. Talked about these 2 trainings last month, but I wanted to send you another reminder that we have these opportunities coming up on the horizon. So we have the Volunteer Tennessee Volunteerism and Service Learning Conference that's happening next year in Franklin, which is in Middle Tennessee, right around Valentine's Day. So February 13th to the 15th. I know that the committee is about to release, if they haven't already, I haven't seen it, but I know it's coming very close to them releasing call for proposals. So if you have any topics, I would encourage you to submit a proposal and speak at this really great conference. I will be there and support you 10,000%. We also have the Tennessee Federation for the Aging Rising Above Aging with Passion and Purpose Conference. Registration is now open for that. It's going to be in Pigeon Forge over in East Tennessee, October 26th to the 28th. There are 4 tracks. So we have a track designated for Senior Center and Nutrition, one for Home and Community-Based Services, one for Elder Rights and Justice, and then kind of a potpourri track that has a lot of kind of, I don't want to say miscellaneous, but ones that don't fit in those other 3. And yes, there is a volunteer engagement session lined up. I will not be doing it either. So it's not going to be something that you've heard from me. This is going to be a different presenter. So, Rebecca said it's open already. The call for proposals is open. Perfect. I just haven't gotten that link, Oh, I will be sure to send that out. Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions on these conferences, or let me know. Also, if you have any other trainings that you know about that you'd like me to share with the group, doesn't necessarily have to be specifically volunteer focused. While this series is specifically about volunteer engagement, we have so many other roles and job responsibilities that a training that you know about, someone at another part of the state could find very, very valuable. And yes, I will send the agenda for the TFA conference in my follow-up email, absolutely. Another quick reminder that as part of the Volunteer Tennessee Volunteerism and Service Learning Conference, they do the Governor Star Awards, which is a great way to nominate an individual volunteer from your program to receive recognition and show that appreciation to keep them around. So I don't think applications for the Star Awards is open yet. Again, it probably could be. Rebecca probably knows. But once that application is open, I'll let you guys know, and also you can check back on the site. But awards are given per county. So that's 95 opportunities we have to get our volunteers recognized. So something to keep in mind. All right, before I talk about next year's series, let's see what some people have learned throughout this year. One thing was usage of volunteers of different age groups. Excellent. Communication makes good volunteer programs a better volunteer program. I can't agree with that more. Ooh. The keep out was a good reminder. One isn't always thought. That's definitely one that's not always thought about or factored into why volunteers leave. Definitely. Just having reminders is a good takeaway. Keeping it also gives us ideas on how to make our programs better and keep our volunteers on board longer. Yep. Whoop. Burnout to present a leave of absence form or policy so volunteers can request a leave is a great idea. Absolutely. COVID is causing burnout. Yeah, we didn't touch on that, but yeah, I can definitely see that as we lost volunteers, we're putting some more work on those that stuck around with us. And for some others, just to take time away, always encouraging volunteers that want to step away that you can connect in other ways if interested. Absolutely. And definitely helpful in incorporating volunteers into the program. Perfect. There was one big takeaway, or two, sorry, that I was thinking about as I was coming up with my thoughts. The first one was, I believe it was back in February when Alex Ropes from Washington State, the Humane Society, came to talk to us. She talked about cases, copy all, steal everything, share. I love that. You don't want to reinvent the wheel with something that's already created. So I think our group has really come together. We've shared so many resources, and I think that just goes along with everything that we're able to do for one another across the state. So I think that was a really great one. And then when Keita, our own Keita Cole, I don't believe she can be on here with us today, but Keita mentioned when she was talking about different recruitment strategies for volunteers, is volunteers don't like being called volunteers. I never connected those two. So if we can come up with creative ways for our volunteer roles, that could help us, attract more people. She's a marketing person, so I can definitely see why she connected those dots a lot sooner than me. But I know for my ride, instead of calling them volunteer drivers, I believe, and if Glenda's still on, she can correct me if I'm wrong, or Cindy, I think you're on too, they're waymakers. And we have a program called the Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program. And instead of calling them volunteers, they're music managers. Who doesn't want to be a music manager? That's just really creative and catching for people who want to volunteer. So thank you for sharing your takeaways. Those were mine. And I'm hoping next year's series, yes, Waymakers. Good. Thank you, Cindy. I thought I had that right. Coming soon. So we will be back for from January to September 2022. Man, it's crazy to say 2022, isn't it? I'll start the planning process within the next few weeks and would really appreciate some of your feedback. So I'm practicing what I preach here in terms of uh, everything that I talk about. So I'll be creating and sending the survey out pretty similar to what I did last year to determine some of our needs, such as the dates and times that are better for everyone. So we went from a Friday to a Thursday. So who knows where 2022 will take us. We had some wonderful guest speakers this year, and I would love to get even more next year. I have noticed, not taking offense to it, but I have noticed that our guest speakers had higher volumes of attendees, which I totally respect and get. And I know I appreciated their points of views from colleagues here in Tennessee as well as other parts of the state. So I thought those guest speakers were wonderful. So if you have any suggestions of speakers that I can reach out to, or if you want to reach out to your network, please let me know. And lastly, and probably most important, what I want to know from you all is what you want to learn about next year. This isn't just things that I may see or hear about in some trends or read an article about, but I want the topics that excite you, or maybe not excite you, but what you want to learn about for sure, so that you keep coming back every month. So all that to say, just start thinking about these things. I can't wait for the series in 2022, and we're definitely going to have our lineup and everything ready to go by Christmas. Yes, I was thinking Thanksgiving, but I'm going to give myself a little bit more time. But I'll have the calendar of kind of our different topics out to you before Christmas. Maybe sooner, hopefully. We'll see. I did have one final thought, and I'm going to figure out how to do a poll. This will be the first time I do a poll in Teams, and goodness, I hope it works. But what I was thinking about doing is, since we have the next 3 months, quote unquote, off, because we're not having our webinars in October, November, and December, what I was thinking about doing is sending out a monthly email, just short and sweet, on the days on the third Thursday of those months when we would normally meet to talk to one another in this capacity. I'm going to go ahead and launch the survey and see if it pops up. But would you all be interested in me just doing a monthly email check-in with any updates and trainings or anything like that? Just having just a quick little thing. Hey, if you need me, I'm still here. So if you guys would do me a favor, hopefully the poll has shown up on your screen. So we got the options. I think I shared the poll. I hope this works. Do you like the monthly email update idea? Yes, no, maybe. Give you guys a little bit more time to put that together. Oh, I guess I should probably. I can't see the results because I didn't do the poll. There's one thing that I learned is I have to actually respond. Okay. Those look like we're getting a majority of yeses. I appreciate everyone. Yeses and maybes. I'm just happy that there are no nos, I guess is a really good way to look at that. All right, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and export the results. Good, it worked. Yay, that's so exciting. Sorry, thank you guys for bearing with me while I learn new, fun, exciting things to do in terms of Teams. Let's see, we had a couple other Waymakers. Okay. Alrighty, and with that, I want to thank you all so much again, as always, for hanging out with me. And if you ever need anything, I'm just a phone call or email away. Please, if we don't talk, or please let me know anything that I can do to help. Please let me know. If we don't talk before January, I hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday season, and we will talk as soon as we can. So thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and hang out a little bit longer in case anybody has any questions. So thank you all so much again.